This morning, is there a political solution to what happened in Uvalde? Democrats and Republicans remain far apart on what needs to happen. State Senator Roland Gutierrez represents Uvalde and joins us in a moment. Governor Abbott said the elementary school shooter did not have a history of mental health problems, but then said mental health is the solution. Is the Republican-led legislature willing to consider anything else? We'll ask Republican State Rep James White. The confrontation being talked about across the country. Did Democrat Beto O'Rourke help or hurt his cause by confronting Governor Abbott so publicly? And Congressman Mark Vesey on what it will take to get both sides in the same room to at least start talking.
Inside Texas Politics with Jason Whiteley starts now.
Good Sunday morning to you. There is nothing more front and center right now in Texas politics than what happened in Uvalde. We'll spend a lot of this program on that and the police response. But let's begin with some other political headlines happening here in our state. Hours after winning the Republican nomination for a third term, Attorney General Ken Paxton faced a new lawsuit. The State Bar of Texas filed this one. It's arguing that Paxton violated ethical standards and committed professional misconduct when he went to court in 2020 and falsely claimed that the election was stolen from Donald Trump. If the Supreme Court overturns Roe v. Wade, Texas lawmakers now want to punish businesses that help their employees get abortions in other states. There are 14 Republican state lawmakers here in Texas who said they would not let companies do business here in our state if they pay for abortions in states where abortion is legal. And Congressman Henry Cuellar survived a very close call in last week's runoff election. This one attracted national attention because Cuellar is a pro-life Democrat. 45,000 votes cast, Cuellar defeated his challenger Jessica Cisneros by 177 votes. It almost seems insensitive right now to discuss politics after seeing the faces of the children murdered in their own classroom in Uvalde. But politics can create solutions. Republicans run the state government here in Texas, and we invited the top leaders in our state on the program here with us this morning. Some said they did not have time in their schedule. Others just did not respond. So this morning, we are speaking with a state senator who represents Uvalde. We called Democrat Roland Gutierrez at his office in San Antonio. Senator Gutierrez, thanks for being on the program here. I want to ask you a question that the governor said the other day. He said he spoke to local leaders in Uvalde there, and they blamed mental health. Is that what's causing this?
No, Jason. I mean, it's part of it, sure, but it's not the entire picture. These are deranged individuals across Texas, the United States, that have perpetrated these acts. The facts are that if they didn't have access to this type of militarized weaponry, the carnage wouldn't be as bad. We have to take a clear look at this issue and start finding common sense gun solutions so that we don't have this happen again. Red flag laws, wait periods, age limit restrictions. It's very simple. This isn't rocket science. If we create some changes, we will stop this to some degree.
Do you think the massacre, though, that happened there at Robb Elementary, did that change any of your Republican colleagues at all?
I have yet to hear one of them in the Texas legislature say anything more than thoughts and prayers, mental health, and evil. Yes, there's mental health. Yes, these young men are evil. I get it. But if they don't have access to this type of weaponry and ammunition, I would argue that a young man that goes in and buys an over-the-counter AR-15 a day after his birthday, 2 days later goes to the same store, buys another one, buys 375 rounds of ammunition, I would argue that's a significant red flag for someone to call the authorities. But we don't have a law in place for that to happen. I filed a bill in 2019, sat in committee. They control the House, they control the Senate. We need common sense gun solutions.
Senator, you talked about wanting Congress to do something to act on this. Have you given up on the Texas legislature?
Well, in part, yes, and I've in part given up on Congress on some level because we need to break the filibuster in the United States Senate. But, I'm in this business because I believe in hope. I hope that we can come to terms and compromise. I'm not asking to take anybody's guns away. I'm asking to not grant access to young men of a certain age at this time to those types of weapons. I'm suggesting that we should have wait periods, that we should have significant background checks, that we should have red flag laws. We need to have things in place to safeguard our people. That's what people elect us to do. And that's it. This isn't rocket science. It's so simple. And yet the governor, time and time again, incident after incident, it's mental health. These people are deranged. They're still going to kill people. Yeah, maybe. It's harder to kill 19 people with a pistol.
Last question here for you, too. You've talked to your constituents on the ground there in Uvalde. What have they said that they want done?
Honestly, Jason, right now, people in Uvalde are just heartbroken. They're heartbroken. We're not in the policy discussion period right now with my constituents in Uvalde. I'm hugging grandmothers. I'm seeing if people need healthcare costs paid. Funeral expenses paid for. The people of San Antonio have opened up their hearts and their pocketbooks and offered to help. I'm going to see if they need that help.
Senator, thank you for the time.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right, Uvalde is the fourth major mass shooting in Texas over the last few years. Remember, there was one at a church in Sutherland Springs in 2017, at Santa Fe High School outside Houston in 2018, at an El Paso Walmart in 2019. So let's take a look back this morning at what the Governor Abbott and the Republican legislature have and have not done to stop these. Joining us this morning is Matthew Watkins. He is the news and politics managing editor for the Texas Tribune. Matthew, thanks for being here. The team there at the Trib has really taken a deep dive to look at this. Let's start out, break this up in two parts. What has the legislature actually done to try to stop mass shootings so far?
Well, we've seen a few things. We saw after Santa Fe, there was a big conversation about hardening schools, as they used the term. It was basically making schools safer from situations like this. Some grant money went out to school districts to help pay for it, including to Uvalde, where this mass shooting was most recently. You know, it was a small amount of money and obviously was not enough to completely prevent another mass shooting, but it was a big area of focus. There's also been some funding that's gone into mental health around these areas. Right. And that has been the bulk of it. I mean, the hardening of schools has been a big priority, and it's something that we've seen come up again after this shooting.
And remind us briefly here, Matthew, lawmakers have refused some other measures. What were they? Yeah,
there was talk after some of the more recent shootings prior to Uvalde about, do we take any measures to address guns in any kind of way? Governor Greg Abbott raised the idea of red flag laws, which is basically allowing a judge to prevent certain people from being able to buy guns. Dan Patrick talked about confronting the NRA about background checks. That ultimately did not happen, and they ended up going the opposite direction, as you know, and right. Doing what they termed constitutional carry, basically the permitless carry of handguns in the most recent legislative session. We saw a lot of pushback, a lot of frustration from legislators in El Paso after that happened.
Yeah, they certainly loosened it last session. Matthew, back to you in a moment. Thank you very much. Coming up next here on this program, why did police wait an hour to confront the Uvalde shooting suspect inside the school? One of our questions there for Republican State Rep James White, then Congressman Mark Vesey, on what it will take to get both sides in the same room to at least start talking. Plus, George P. Bush lost the runoff for Texas Attorney General. Are any Bush Republicans left in this state? And a Texas ecologist. She wrote the UN's climate report, the latest one at least, and she reveals what some governments around the world wanted to edit out of her document. It's our latest episode of Y'all-itics. Download it this weekend, wherever you get your podcasts. Welcome back to Inside Texas Politics. Congressman Joaquin Castro from San Antonio is calling for a federal investigation into the law enforcement failed response in Uvalde. Victims' families are also asking why officers remained outside for an hour rather than confronting the school shooter inside the building. That delay, we know now, cost lives. Our next guest is Republican State Rep James White from Southeast Texas. He chairs the House Homeland Security and Public Safety Committee, and he has been briefed by Texas DPS. Mr. Chairman, welcome back to the program. After the first two police officers in Uvalde there were shot when they went into the school following the gunman, law enforcement waited to enter again. We're hearing the bystanders were frustrated, telling police just to go inside. We understand that your committee has been briefed on this. What is your reaction to the delay that law enforcement instituted?
Well, thank you so much for that question. And obviously, as a former school teacher representing 26 school districts in Deep East Texas, the citizens of Deep East Texas are standing with our fellow citizens, our fellow Texans in Uvalde. Let me be clear on this. And look, we know the job of the press. I'm not in a position right now to second guess Thursday morning, Sunday morning quarterback local law enforcement. This is what I do know. It was law enforcement that eventually went into that building, neutralized and killed the person that murdered, just murdered in cold blood those young kids and their teachers. And right now, as far as assessing any blame, I'm putting it squarely. I'm not going to even say the person's name. I don't want to give them any more notoriety than we've had to give them. It's squarely on the blame. It's squarely on the person that went into that school and shot and murdered those kids. That's where I'm assessing the blame at right now. As DPS gets more information to us, we will, as a committee, we will evaluate it and make sure we have best practices moving forward.
Mr. Chairman, the governor the other day said that the Uvalde shooter did not have a history of mental illness, but then the governor said that mental health is the answer. Curious, as a Republican, what else should the Republican-led legislature be considering besides mental health? Okay,
well, we should be looking at everything. Okay, you can't have a jarring incident like this and not look at everything. But it's important that we get the information from the investigation first. So let me tell you, for example, I have people saying we should go right back into session and pass universal background checks. I'm finding out not only did this murderer pass 2 federal background checks, but there was an additional background check because he had conducted multiple purchases within 30 days. An Obama promulgated rule for the ATF, anytime someone in a border state like Texas and this was done to prevent gun running, okay? Anytime someone purchases more than one weapon in a 30-day period, ATF does another background check. So we want to look at the background checks. We want to look at mental health services. We want to look at everything to include the safety of our schools, the response of our law enforcement, to make sure that we curb these incidents in the great state of Texas.
Mr. Chairman, we appreciate the time as always.
Thank you, sir.
Now to Washington, D.C. and Congress, where Democrats are in the majority, for now at least. Will the left come together to get anything done after Uvalde? Congressman Mark Vesey is a Democrat who represents parts of Fort Worth and of Dallas, and he is on the Gun Violence Task Force in the House as well. Congressman, good to see you again. Welcome back to the program here. Democrats have a narrow majority in Congress, at least until November. Is there any piece of legislation that might address what happened in Uvalde that House Democrats and Senate Democrats could come together on?
Oh, I think that it's easy. I think that that it's a no-brainer that we need to come together on passing the 2 background check bills, and we also need to pass a red flag bill. Those are all 3 reasonable bills. They have nothing to do with bans of any sorts. They just stop psychopaths and criminals and other people that shouldn't have guns from getting them. Now, if you're not for that, then you're nuts. If you think that criminals and sociopaths and terrorists should have guns in America, then that means that you're crazy. and it should be easy to come together and get this bill passed, these bills passed, excuse me.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you about that, Congressman, because that would stop some people. But in this case, the shooter in Uvalde did not have a criminal record. He did not have any mental health issues that we know of right now. I mean, that wouldn't stop what we saw down there, would it?
I don't think that there's anything as the perfect bill at all. I don't think that we're ever going to be able to completely stop this from happening. But if you look at what happened in Charleston, South Carolina, it would have stopped him. If you look at Sutherland Springs, it would have stopped that murderer. I can rattle off many, many more that it would have made it a lot harder for them to get a gun. We pass bills to make things better, not make things perfect. After the 64 Civil Rights Bill was passed, let me tell you, as a Black man, there's still a lot of discrimination in America. There's still a lot of discrimination in Dallas-Fort Worth. But I guarantee you that the life that I live is much better than what my mom was living in 1964.
The governor says the shooter did not have a history of mental health, but then he said that access to mental health is the answer. How much does mental health play in this?
I think that mental health plays a huge role in this. I think that anybody that decides they're just going to randomly fire a gun and kill that many people obviously has some huge issues. But I also want to call the governor on something else. You know, he's so busy trying to line himself up to be the front runner for the Republican primary in 2024 for the presidency that he won't expand Medicaid in this state. And if he were to expand Medicaid in this state, guess what? There'd be a lot more people that could receive mental health services. And there have been other red states that have expanded Medicaid. We haven't here because of political games and extremist party politics in the Republican Party. And that has to come to an end. Every now and then, guess what? We all have to vote against things that maybe people in the primaries don't like because we think that it's the best thing for the country.
Congressman, we appreciate the time. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Jason.
Coming up, the confrontation that had everyone talking last week. Did Beto O'Rourke help or hurt his cause when he interrupted Governor Abbott's news conference? We'll ask the roundtable about that in just a moment. Time now for Reporters Roundtable to put the headlines in perspective. Matthew Watkins is back with us from the Texas Tribune in Austin. Bud Kennedy is here from the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. Bernadine Steptoe is a political producer at WFAA in Dallas and joins us each week for this segment too. Bud, let's start with you. President Biden in Uvalde today, and it already seems tense there politically, especially with Beto O'Rourke confronting Greg Abbott the other day, and the mayor of Uvalde up there screaming and cursing at Beto. What is the political backdrop for this presidential visit?
Of course, this is a part of the state that's just gone through a volatile primary. It's part of the state. Although this isn't deep South Texas, it's still part of the state that Democrats are afraid of losing ground. The Republicans feel like they've gained ground. The mayor actually was a Greg Abbott critic. The mayor supported Don Huffines in the primary and called Greg Abbott useless, but was really up there sticking up for him the other day. Turned out one of his councilmen was the school police chief who might have made the mistakes.
And Matthew, Budd is right there. The mayor, very outspoken, but also Beto O'Rourke is the one that stood up to interrupt the governor. Did that help Beto's cause or hurt his cause, Matthew?
You know, it's really hard to say. It certainly did not play well in the room. I think there were a lot of people in that community and around the state and really the nation who wanted to know details, really wanted to know the facts, and they were still processing it. And it felt a bit jarring in the moment. I think there are a lot of people who are angry. Beto O'Rourke is one of them, about the lack of inaction, particularly related to guns in the wake of all these shootings in Texas. And the people who are upset about that, I think, responded well to it. I think the question is the more moderate voters, parents, things like that, whether that felt like the appropriate time for that to happen. And I know there's certainly a lot of people who felt like it wasn't.
Yeah, and that's what I've kind of heard also, Bernadine. What's your take on this and with the presidential visit there today?
Oh, I think that the president had to come to Texas. It was the noble thing to do. You had 19 children who were murdered, who were killed. So he had to come to the state. And as far as Beto, I don't think he's going to be hurt because keep in mind, there's a lot more coming out of that press conference than just Beto interrupting it because there was a lot of information that was not correct. So I think that you have more concerns about what came out of the press conference than what Beto did. And then those who were terribly upset about it, and I do agree with Matthew in terms of the independent. But at this point, there's a lot more coming out of that press conference and coming out that are not necessarily factual. People just want information. I think they moved past Beto interrupting Abbott.
Yeah, the politics of that. Bud, let me ask you about a completely different political story here. George P. Bush in last Tuesday's runoff, he got crushed by Ken Paxton. A lot of traditional Republicans had faith that George P. Bush might be the person to topple Paxton. Does this suggest that the Bush dynasty is over in this state that they once controlled?
Well, there were a couple of problems there. I don't think George P. Bush was really known for anything except being a Bush. He didn't really have an identity or anything that he was known for in the party to help him through the primary. In a Republican primary these days, you have to either preach God or preach Trump. And George P. Bush wasn't really known for either.
Bernadine, you've watched this for a long time.
Well, I think that the Bush dynasty had passed before George P. because his daddy didn't do well here. So it was just, he's not what Texas is about in terms of Republicans.
Yeah, that's a good point. Jeb Bush did not play well here when he ran for president a few years ago. Matthew, final word here.
Yeah, and also Pierce Bush, a nephew of the former president who lost a primary, finished third in a primary in Houston. So it is unquestionably true that the Bush name does not go as far as it used to in the state of Texas.
Not at all. Matthew, thanks so much. Bud, Bernadine, thank you very much. We appreciate it. Thank you for joining us as well. We're back again next Sunday to take you inside Texas politics and hope you can join us then. Until then, have a great week.